Welcome back. What we're talking about now is how to build VLOOKUPs using either the function or just simply keying them straight in. But we want to parameterize these VLOOKUP functions where they're a little bit more dynamic. And by that, I mean to make the formulas where they pull without actually hard coding inside the formula. Hard coding is always not a good thing, so we want to parameterize these as much as possible. And usually it's a two-step process. So here we have a table with what appears to be is for a drone business, and basically the drone business, what the person asked us to do is help us figure out things and put it in this table. And it's just a summary snapshot of what it would be. It'd be much larger, so building these initial calculations will benefit them. So here's our questions are asked, what we need to do and solve. Anything I blanked out all the other information out to create noise. And so we're only going to focus on the VLOOKUPs here. Now, if you look at the equipment, it tells you here on the right the table source, equipment VLOOKUPs table source, which is this tab here in red. Equipment table, salary table, salary table. And the first one, let's take a look at these tables. So we go over here to source, and we see there's three tables: table 1, table 2, table 3. So there is an equipment table here, which is the first table, a pilot table, and what the equipment table does is tell us what kind of drone equipment is available, how much the drone equipment costs, what's the range of the drone equipment, whether or not they require a pilot. They all require pilots. And then the second one, the pilot table, actually goes a little deeper whether or not it requires the pilot. So it's a little duplication here, as you can see, and which is not good table design, but that's okay. And it also importantly tells you whether or not you have a spotter required. It tells you how many drones are there. So you have a pilot required and a spotter required. So sometimes you need to have a spotter if you're flying like first person view, FPV. And here's the salary table for the company. And we can actually hit the format real fast to make it easy. And what they estimate, they're trying to forecast their business. And they estimate salary for these kind of fields are as follows. So the spotters make less than the drone pilots, but they're still important people in that regard, and substantially less in some cases. So it's interesting. So first you have to determine if the spotter is required, and then you got to do a salary table. So they're almost not really normalized tables, but they're tables in Excel. We just leave it at that. Then over here, let's take a look at this. Spotter required. This is not really the salary table, right? We saw that in the pilot table. We're just going through and make sure we understand where our data is. And salary tables, this is spotter salaries till applicable. In other words, if I need a spotter for this event, this is what the salaries are for a year for these kind of events. All right, this is equipment table. And you can see phase 1 investment requirement for property valuation, general delivery, outdoor sporting events. And these are multi-purpose drones. I guess these are drones that we could use from the left. So if you buy a property valuation drone, you might be able to use it for medical supplies and testing or general events. Actually, general delivery will probably work really well for medical support if you're delivering medical products and drugs and pharmaceuticals. Whereas outdoor sporting events might actually work very well for general events. But what we're really focused on here, these are secondary causes, these are primary uses, right? Phase 1 investment requirement. And we're looking at drone type, drone cost, range, and understanding the drones from the equipment table, what this will do for us. So we see it by property valuation. So if you go over here and you look at this table, property valuation is on the left side. So the VLOOKUP formula, the way it works is it reads from left to right, as opposed to say the XLOOKUP, which actually go from any direction in that case. So this is actually pretty cool. But these actually lend themselves to working left to right, and we can parameterize these VLOOKUP formulas. So this first one, all looking here, type, cost, and range. Look over here, and we have drone type, cost, and range. Okay, so this is the way it works: is column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. So drone is column 2, cost is column 3, range is column 4. So the first thing to parameterize something, just is it 2, 3, 4? So that's that one. Those are all set. Then spotter required, this comes from the pivot table, spotter required, and spotter required right here. So this would be the 1, 2, 3, 4th column. So we just got to identify the columns where these are. And then the last one is spotter and salaries. So this looks like two VLOOKUPs, right? Because there's two fields here. There's FPV, the first person view salary, and spotter requires, so this is column 2 and column 3. So there's two columns here. So this you can't really, you can only put one number in a cell, not 2 and 3 numbers in a cell with a VLOOKUP. But you know, maybe if we have the reference, if we're going to do a double V, maybe we could actually insert it. You just call this reference 1, and then call this reference 2. So if I have 2, so this is 2 and 3. So now I have the columns where these VLOOKUPs go, and it's just a matter of really executing the VLOOKUP at this point. The trick to this is how many formulas do we really have if we do it properly. We have one for this, should be one formula for this because it's using all the same table. One formula because this is using another table, and one formula for this because it's using yet a third table. So the first table is equal V lookup, open parenthesis, property evaluation is the lookup value. We'll deal with anchoring or making actual references shortly, but first we'll actually just knock this out. Comma, to execute the range, you want to do the table array. So just highlight the whole table here. Don't highlight the headers of the table because that's more for your information than it is computer information. Comma, then what is the column offset of this? Well, the column offset, for simplicity, because we're on another page, is put 2 at the moment, comma false, because we want an exact match. Those are your two options, true and false. Then hit the checkbox, and we'll just take this in stages. So let's see. So HLOOKUP, table source H3 to H9. Read the first one. H3. Whoa, did I read that right? A3 to H9. That's right. I thought I misread that. A3 to H9. Good. So I got the first table. Comma 2, comma false. We're looking for property evaluation in this table, which is the H4 value, right? So it should come in, and it should give us this one's in the second column, which is the first column is hits in A3. Okay, let's take a look. This came back with a false designation, and the reason it came back with this error, just making sure, is because I put a dot, not a comma. So if I put that, change that dot to a comma, that was good. Now it would have been probably a little easier in this if you would use the function builder, the lookup value, the lookup range, the column index, and the false. You could have actually done it here, which is a little nicer, so I wanted to do it both ways. I kind of free-handed it, but now I went to the function builder and look at it. So when I'm going to copy this to the right, so I don't want to anchor the column, I just want to anchor the 4 because I'm going to also copy it down. That's fine. So that's 4, make that absolute reference. And then here in the range, you do need to anchor a range on a VLOOKUP. However, you know, really when it gets to these things, it's actually not a bad idea to come over and just simply create a name range, type equipment. You don't have to worry about lookups, and this is pilots table. Put TBL if you like, make it a little nicer, and then salary TBL, because it makes it a little easier than using all the ranges and everything. And equipment TBL. Okay, so we have we use name ranges instead. We go back to our formula, click on it. And now, instead of writing this big long equation here, let's see if we can just type in equipment TBL. That worked out quite well, right? You saw that? I don't need to anchor it or anything else. I use the name range. It knows where it is, so I copy it left to right, and it'll be just fine. using the name range. It's still column 2, but the thing is, I put the 2 over here in a reference, so really I don't need to have number 2. I can just click this reference, and because I'm going to copy this to the right, I can simply, copying it down, I want it to float or have a relative nature, put a $ in front of the 6, that way I can copy it down with little or no problems, and that's good. So now I've kind of taken this, I created one folder, one formula, and I should be able to, let's see if it works. Oh, isn't that copy? Hold on a second. I must be hitting the wrong key. Weird. Working a lot on my computer this morning. So we got those. Copy. Ha! If I go with that, so undo. My computer is running out of memory probably. Just go over one. It'll do it one, we won't do it twice. Interesting. It's just one of those things this morning. It's just a memory problem. Alright, so this is good. Let's go over here. So you like this. This time maybe we'll look at the second table, which we knew was the spot required table. So then again, we can see that the function's there. It's not. We'll go search for the function. We look up value. Well, you know, technically, what we could do better if we did it right the first time, we can copy this function down here and paste it over here. But we know it's wrong. But is the biggest difference what's wrong is it's just that we're using the wrong table, where we just have to go in and look over here, and we know that this table here is highlighted to pilots TBL. So if we just copy this function down and then come to the function builder and type in pilots TBL, now we have it. The index column is still floating, so it works just fine, and we're able to cheat. So there I'm able to use two different look at that. Every time I do it, it's just doing that. So I go through, copy it, paste it, copy it, paste it, and it worked just fine. Probably because I have this window open. Let's just see if that's what's causing it. Copy it, see if it blanks out everything. Now that time I did it. So having the function builder over was causing my problems on the copy command. And then only MacBook Pro, so it could be part of the problem. Alright, so now we learned that I can take the same formula if it's done well, because this all has structure. It all pulls from the same row as the VLOOKUP. So I copied it down. The only thing I had to do to change here is the tables. So it wasn't so bad. So we copied 2 of the 3 formulas. Now this one here is a little bit different. This formula here says I need 2 salaries if it requires a drone pilot. It could be a nested if formula. So the way I like to build a nested if formula is build the 2 pieces. And that way I know if something's wrong. The if statement, so you go equal if this is a y equals, in quotes, y. Then, if that condition is true, then we go ahead and need to look up salary. I'm just going to type in, we're going to have to look for something. We'll just type it lookup. And I'm going to replace this with the formula in a minute. Otherwise, which is probably NA because it's not applicable. Then close the quote. So that's the if statement. So that's a lookup. See, it works without the function builder open. it might be able to copy. Okay, so the first, I'm going to need this formula to work for 2 of the 3, but of course we want one formula that does it all. So now it's just really a matter of doing the VLOOKUPs. Well, we've already cheated once, why not cheat again? And the only difference between this formula and this formula is the table, right, which is salary table. So if you remember our tables, We have salary TBL. We just got to put salary TBL in here. And we had salary TBL for the first. Okay, that was a good way of cheating. Let me copy this. I'm going to copy it here if it doesn't move relatively. That's the first. I'm going to build this in stages. There's actually multiple functions here. So you notice I paste here. It's very different copying the cell. It's very different to copy a formula in a cell and then paste it here. Because exactly what happens is it doesn't move anything. If I just copy it down, the relative references will take over. All right. Now, here's a second VLOOKUP for this is the first VLOOKUP. We have to look and see which one it is. So the first VLOOKUP is from the salary, FPV salary, which is column 2. The second is column 3. And we already placed those in. So the second one is probably just going to be, instead of looking at cell D, it's going to look at cell E. And it's this number, so that gives us the second value. So we created the lookups here for it. And I'm going to paste that down here. So I have all three parts sitting that I need. There's really three functions here. There's an if function, there's a VLOOKUP 1, and a VLOOKUP 2. Okay, so we just need to put this in here. So the first thing is, let's just come back, copy it, paste the first part in, which is the V condition. Paste. All right, so yes, we have to do a lookup. We know that. The second condition, well, there's two conditions here, right? So let's grab this first one without the equal sign. We know that all three work. We're able to look up all the salaries. We have to actually add these two together. So we can come in here where it says look up the value. We delete the lookup because we know we're supposed to look up, and paste the function that we have in there. So it's going to give us, it should give us the 40,000, and it does. Okay, good. Then the last thing we need to do is come back over here to the third piece of this equation, and we need to grab the third piece of this equation, just this stripping, and copy it, and then come back in here, and we sit at the end of this, we're just going to, at the end of the equation, make sure you do it right, plus sign, paste the second VLOOKUP, and now we have it. So 71,200, 71,200, it's there. We've nested it. It worked out. We've used a builder by copying these over. In other words, we were able to take three complex formulas, an if condition, a first VLOOKUP, a second VLOOKUP, and then put everything into one. There are many other ways of doing it. Certainly we could have gone to the salary, and we could have created a total and just looked up on total and removed the complexity out of the calculation. So sometimes consider that as a design opinion. If you want to remove the complexity out of the calculation, you could have come over here and just simply said total salary. Total, it's really FPV salary. Like any words you have in FPV, you will have to use people to get it to work. And we could have done that too. But it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you just can't have access to the tables. Maybe those fields don't exist. So you have to be able to do it both ways. The key thing here is to break the formula into three pieces. Look how I cleverly copied the formula from here rather than using relative references. And by doing that, I'm able to build more complex formulas and validate that they're all right. If there's a problem, I can take each piece out, break them into their pieces, and able to compute everything. So here we have it. We have a table. We computed the table. We can apply more formatting to the table. Maybe some, dollar, we put commas, decimal points. I still like everything centered. There we go. We'll make it justify like this, and then we have this table complete. So I hope this was useful. It certainly was for me. It was good to go through it and enlighten it. The key thing here to change it using these references is nothing's really hard coded in this formula. As you saw, I was able to make one formula basically, pretty much copy that formula down almost through the whole way, except for here where I had to add it twice. But really, just creating one good formula in the table created all the value I needed to build the whole table. Okay, welcome back. We're going to continue this in part 2. Here in this part, we're going to look at the if and function and the if or function. I've already created one. And what I wanted to do is examine the two functions. So the if and function basically gives you a double condition. You say if and if H12 equals Y for yes and it's greater than 80,000, then give me a true. Otherwise, give me a false. So in this first condition, you can see that the first condition of Y was met, but it's not greater than 80,000. So the second condition was not met. So it is false. That's very different than an if or, which is basically the same syntax, except you have an or instead of the word and. So you're using this syntax. And if you look at it, in this case, it's a true condition. What happens is that if it's either or, right? So in this case, the cell has a Y. In this case, it's not greater than the other, but one of the two conditions is met. Therefore, it's a true statement. So you can create these calculations and copy it. So let's take a look at this calculation a bit deeper. If we go to the function builder, we can see the if statement, the logical test, is the and is actually the word A and D, open parenthesis, the first condition, the second condition, separated by a comma, and the whole thing in parentheses. Then a true statement and a false statement. You can put anything you want inside this. You can nest another VLOOKUP or those kind of things. If we want to write one from scratch, let's just take a write one from scratch. We basically say equal if open parenthesis and open parenthesis. You can remember we had that condition in there. So we say the and condition here is if this cell is equal to, in quotes, n, right, separated by comma, then the second condition, which is here, is greater than 80,000. The second condition, close parentheses, this is parentheses related to the and part of it. So if you meet these two conditions, then we just say, in quotes, true. And put the comma there, make sure not period this time. Then comma, otherwise false. And then close parentheses, let's see if I got it right. I did get it right. So you saw how that equation worked, where I was able to put the first if, let's go to the function builder, and we could have simply wrote it here, and we could have tagged it along the way here as well. So this is the function. And the first is if and A and D, open parenthesis, your first condition separated by a comma. You start building the string of commas, and you can do that in a logical test. And you can do that here. That's what, just an and condition to put a string of variables or conditions in place, and the true and then the false. Then if you want to get to the or condition, let's see if this will work. We copy the and that we've done, that we just wrote. Yeah, because I don't need that. And remember, I'm cheating with the copy and paste. I know that is terrible. But here, all we should be able to do is simply put the or condition in here. And then once we get to the or, using the or, we're able to put the or in there, and we're able to work. So that's use of the if and or if or function using the same table as before. However, we talked about, and of course we can certainly copy these and bring them to the right. But the other thing is, with these conditions, you can parameterize these conditions by stating the first condition, which is a y. It's also a y, and the threshold of greater than could be in here, could be in there, and we can parameterize these conditions. And so the first thing you can do is you can come back to the original formula instead of saying equal y, you say h or d17. Let's see if that'll work. And d17, we're going to copy this to the right and down, possibly. So let's just make sure it stays in one column. And this, I always like to test things in two things. It doesn't hurt to hit the enter key or the checkbox. Okay, that seemed to work just fine. And then the greater than, see if we can fit that in there. That symbol, the greater than, will be E17, $ E17. See if that worked. And it does. So we're able to parameterize those two conditions and build it in. So when we copy it down, it was false because we have to change it to the or condition and just change from an and to an or. We have and, whoa, did I not mess it up? Let's see the or. I think I messed it up. So in this case, if H13 equals D18, which is a yes, or H14 is greater than E18, should be fine. This one works. Let's see what we did here. I'm going to copy this back to see what the difference is. This function here, let's take a look at the function builder. Sometimes come back here to see what we did. So D18 is a yes condition. Logical test is true. Is false. Logical test is false. The or condition came false. So H13. Oh, I see the mistake going forth in here. The H13 is not anchored, so when I copy the H13 down, it actually, the copy down is what got it. So we come back to the and condition. Let's make sure we do this properly. H12. We need to anchor the 12 to make these formulas fully functional. And we need to anchor the 13 because the two conditions stay the same. And then we hit the checkbox to achieve it. So now we come back in, we copy it down. See, that was a relative reference problem. Then we change it to or. And it's good to make these mistakes because then you can go troubleshoot them and then see what the problem is to understand where you did something right or where you did something wrong. So here we will take a function, write it once, we use relative references and make sure absolute references get it right. And now we put the parameter over here. So if we change this to 70,000 and we change this to 70,000, the outcomes will change. Or 90,000. So things are there, right? Or 96,000. See on this one. So one of the conditions is met, right? You can change the no, and things went. So you're able here to change the parameters and then change the settings of the parameters. That way you can parameterize an equation to make it more flexible. Because really what you don't want to do is coming in and constantly having to update your formulas. So you want to parameterize them as much as possible as opposed to hard coding anything. And then where you have the true and the false condition, then what you could do is you can put other statements in there. If this is true, do a VLOOKUP. If this is true, do another if statement. So we've already shown you how to make a nested statement here, but now we've also shown you how to do an if and, or an if or. So you have both the if and, in, if or.